Seches Nazir Daf Dalid contains two short mishnayos right near each other, both introducing the topic of Nazirus Shimshon, what it is and what its rules are. Until then, the Gemara is going to conclude its discussion about a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim about if somebody makes a neder of partial Nazirus, is that chal for the entire Nazirus, and how they each learn their opinion from the psukim. So we have seen, let's begin, we've seen in our previous Mishnah, and the brisa that immediately follows it, that there's a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. When somebody says a partial Nazirus, that is, he lists some of the Isuri Nazirus, like he says he's not going to drink wine, he wants to be that type of Nazir, but not a complete Nazir. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's a partial Nazirus. He's only usher in those things that he mentioned, and it's not a complete Nazirus until he mentions all the items of Nazirus. According to Chachamim, a partial Nazirus is a complete Nazirus. He can't have a partial Nazirus alone, and if he says a partial Nazirus, it automatically is chal as the full Nazirus. So one wants to know what their opinions are. We've already seen it in our last daf, that it's based on how to learn the psukim. According to Rabbi Shimon, the Torah says that someone can make a Nazirus mechartzanim va'adzag. He has to mention all the things included in the Isser, from grape seeds to grape skins, and everything in between. He has to list them out. If he doesn't list them out, then he only has the ones that he mentioned. The Chachamim have a different pasuk entirely. They say it says miyayin v'sheichar yazir. Yayin is wine and sheichar is old wine. Why? They both mentioned. To tell you that if you only mention only one, then it's not chal only on that one, it's chal on all of them. When I want to know what does each one do with the other one. So the Gemara first discusses Rabbi Shimon. Has Rabbi Shimon learned miyayin v'sheichar? The Gemara says that extra phrase is to teach me that even if he makes an Isser, if he makes an Nazirus, he's still not allowed to drink wine, even wine that is a mitzvah to drink. The Gemara explains that couldn't be referring to Kiddush or Havdalah, that every Nazirus applies to, and just like every Nazirus applies to that, there's no reason why you would think otherwise. Obviously, you wouldn't have Nazirus if a person could drink wine for Kiddush and Havdalah. More says it's referring to a case where he made a neder or a shvua that he is going to drink wine, and then he made a Nazirus. So his Nazirus is chal on top of the shvua that he's going to drink wine, and now he can't drink wine even though it violates that shvua. So according to the Rabbanan, that is according to Rabbi Shimon, that is what is learned out of the phrase miyayin v'sheichar. So the Gemara says, what are the Rabbanan going to get that? Where are they going to learn that halacha? The Gemara says that's because it says yayin and sheichar. It says two things. One is to teach me what they said, that you have to, that if you say one thing, it's chal a full Nazirus, and the other one is to teach me this halacha that Nazirus is chal even on wine that you have a mitzvah to drink. Now, the Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Shimon, what is he going to do with the extra word v'sheichar? The lima that he said really only needs miyayin. What's sheichar for? So the Gemara gives two answers for this. Answer number one is to make gzeira shava to someone who's a kohen entering the Beis Hamikdash. The halacha is he's not allowed to get drunk or drink wine and enter the Beis Hamikdash in that state to do avoda. So the question you may ask there is, does that include drinking other intoxicating beverages other than wine? So Rabbi Shimon says you learn a linkage between yayin v'sheichar, where it says by a nazir, and it only refers to wine, doesn't refer to other intoxicating alcoholic things. Therefore, the going to the Beis Hamikdash, there it also says yayin v'sheichar. It says yayin v'sheichar al teisht atu v'nacha itcha, and there it links the two, and there also the Isser only applies to wine and not other intoxicating things. The Gemara notes that this disagrees with a brisa who quotes Rabbi Yehuda that says any intoxication is forbidden for a kohen to enter the Beis Hamikdash. There, the brisa lists if he eats a type of fig that was fermented and it's intoxicating, or alcoholic honey or milk. All these things, according to Rabbi Yehuda, violates the Isser. According to Rabbi Shimon, it does not, and he learns that out of yayin v'sheichar. That's the Gemara's first explanation. Our second explanation is that the word v'sheichar is for something else. Rabbi Shimon holds that generally we don't say a rule of Isser chal Isser. If you have something which is Isser and then another Isser applies on top of it, it's not chal. So for example, if somebody makes a Nazirus on Yom Kippur, so the Isser on the wine is not chal, you would think it's not chal on top of Nazirus, because generally ain't Isser chal Isser. The word of Sheichar is to teach me that it is chal on Isser, and there is now two Isurim on that wine, one because of Yom Kippur, and another because of Nazirus that he made to be chal upon it. So those are the two drushes that he would use for the word v'sheichar, and that explains why v'sheichar is not extra for what the Chachamim want to use it for. and all the other drashas which flow in the same way. Now the Gemara says, what is Reb Shimon going to do with the drasha? What is the Chachamim? What will they do with the drasha that said by Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon had said that the source from his halacha that if you list parts of Nazirus, it's only chal on the parts he mentioned and not all of them. He learned that out of Mikol Sheyase Migefen Hayayin. You have to mention all the things. So what are the Rabbanim gonna do with that? So the Rabbanim says that's for a totally different halacha. That's to teach that if you eat half a kezayis of, let's say, grape skin and half a kezayis of grape seed, the two are starved together to a full share kezayis, and you can get malchus for that. Now Reb Shimon doesn't need that drasha because Reb Shimon holds that you get malchus for a kol shehu. You don't need to have a kezayis. The only thing you need to have a kezayis for is for a carbon, and there's no carbon here. Anyway, there's no carbon. Chatas on a violation of Nazirus. And therefore, he says this drasha is not relevant. Says the next Mishnah, somebody wants to accept Nazirus Shimshon, which the next Mishnah after following this one will define. So he has to say, I am like Shimshon, son of Manoach, wife of Delilah. Or he could say, like the one who ripped the doors off of the building in Atz, one of the famous activities of Shimshon. Or he could say, like the one that the Pelishtim poked out his eye. This creates Nazirus Shimshon. So Gemara, now we have a short Gemara. The Gemara wants to know why do you have to mention all these specifics? Why don't you just say Shimshon? Gemara says if you said Shimshon, I wouldn't know which Shimshon you meant. Even if you said Shimshon, son of Manoach, it could be somebody else. You have to say either Shimshon, son of Manoach, wife of Delilah, or you have to mention the ripping of the door and the poking out of the eyes. Now the next Mishnah says, what is the difference between a permanent Nazir and a Nazirus Shimshon? The Gemara explains you have to insert a line here. You have to say that there's something called Nazir Olam that's missing here. There's a concept of Nazir Olam, which is someone who's a Nazir forever. And that is similar but different to Nazirus Shimshon. Shimshon was also a Nazir forever. And the differences are as follows. Nazirus Shimshon does not have an Isser Tumah. If he becomes Tameh, he doesn't have to bring any Karbanis. Nazirus Olam has a regular Isser Tumah and has to bring regular Karbanis if he becomes Tameh. Now there's leniency the other way. A Nazir Olam is allowed to cut his hair, not shave it, but cut it if it becomes too thick and too heavy. He use a razor and make it shorter. Shimon is not allowed to cut his Shimshon, Nazirus Shimshon is not allowed to cut his hair under any circumstances. Next, the Gemara discusses what exactly is this halacha that Nazirus Shimshon is allowed to become Tameh. Now, the language of our Mishnah seems to imply that he's not allowed to become Tameh. It's only if he does become Tameh, he doesn't have to make a carbon. And that's what it said. It said that somebody who's Nazirus Shimshon doesn't have to bring a carbon if he becomes Tameh. It implies he's not allowed to become Tameh. So Gemara points out there's a machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon about Nazirus Shimshon, and neither one holds that opinion. Rabbi Yehuda holds he's allowed to become Tameh lechatchila. Rabbi Shimon holds there's no such thing as Nazirus Shimshon. No one can ever become a Nazir like Shimshon, because Shimshon was made a Nazir by the Malach. He himself was never Makabel Nazirus, and therefore no one else can accept that. Now, according to either opinion, there's no such thing as a Nazirus Shimshon, which allows on lechatchila to become Tameh. So my answer is our Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda, and our Mishnah also agrees you're allowed to lechatchila become Tameh if you have a Nazirus Shimshon. The only reason it phrased it in a b'di'evet type of phrase, where it said if he becomes Tameh, he don't have to bring a carbon, is to contrast with the discussion of a Nazir Olam, where we said if he becomes Tameh, he does have to bring a carbon on that the 3 karbanos for a Nazir that becomes Tameh. Alright, now the Gemara wants to go deeper into the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon over whether or not it's possible to be Makabel on Nazirus Shimshon. So we said Rabbi Yehuda said you could become a Nazir Shimshon, and Rabbi Yossi says you can't. Gemara says maybe this machlokes is similar to a machlokes about whether or not you could ask for something, you can make a neder on something by saying it's like a bechor. Bechor is something that becomes kadosh by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's born as Bechor. It is given the Kiddush as Bechor at birth. So Gemara says, machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yaakov, if someone says Harei kibechor or Harei alai kibechor, is that chal the neder or not? According to Rabbi Yaakov, it is chal the neder. According to Rabbi Yossi, it's not chal the neder. The Gemara wants to say that machlokes is about could you be matfis? That means could you make a neder by linking something to something which is innately usr, or do you have to link something which it was made in usr? Just like you're making an isser, you have to link it to something else which was made into an isser. So Gemara wants to say, since that's a machlokes, that's probably the machlokes here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Also, could a person be makabel nazirus which is made automatically, or could you only be makabel nazirus which is made through a vow? Shimon's because the Nazirus was not made through a vow. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says you could be matir, you could be madir, you could make a vow of Nazirus even on something which is innately usher, just like Rabbi Yaakov. So he would say that's why he says that the Nazirus Shimshon you could make. But Rabbi Shimon probably holds like Rabbi Yasi. He says you can't make a vow of Nazirus on something, you can't make any vow on something which is innately usher, and therefore you can't make a vow of Nazirus on Shimshon because he is innately usher. The Malach said is going to be a Nazir, he didn't do it on his own. So Gemara says no, that's not the pshat in the machlokes between Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yossi. Everybody agrees you can only link to something which is a neder, not to something which is automatically usher. The pshat in the opinion that says that you could link to a Bukhar is because the pasuk says Ishki Yider Neder La Hashem. The extra phrase La Hashem isn't needed, the extra word La Hashem isn't needed. That's to teach that there is something which is La Hashem that you could do, you could use to be matvis a neder, and that's Bukhar. You could say that something is area like a Bukhar, and that's learned specifically out of the word La. But it has nothing to do with this argument of could you be matvis to somebody which is innately usher or not. So the Gemara asks, okay, so you're telling me the contrary of BIC, he doesn't use his Rosh Hashem. So what does he do with this extra word, La Hashem? The Gemara answers, he agrees the word La Hashem is to include a special type of Isser, a special type of Kedusha that you could link to make a neder, but it's not a Bechar, it's a carbon Chatas and a carbon Asham. Somebody says Hareze ke Chatas v'Asham, that counts. If somebody says Hareze ke Bechar, that doesn't count. Somebody says why? Why should Chatas v'Asham, which are innately Aser, be more usable to make a neder than a bechar, which is also innately asar? The difference is as follows: chatas va'asham, a person's chayiv if he does an avera to bring a carbon chatas or carbon asham. Which animal will that be? That is a neder he makes on his own. So that is a designation he applies on his own. Therefore, it's more close to a davar hanadur, something which is made asar because of a neder, and it makes sense that you could link to it. However, a Bukhar, that's something which is Kaddish Mirechem. It has its Kedusha from birth. You don't have to apply the designation to it at all. So Gemara asks, so what is Rabbi Yaakov going to do with that? How come he says you should go with Bukhar and not Chatas v'Asham? So Gemara answers, he says that a Bukhar you also have to be Makdish. There's a Brisa that he says, there's a Brisa shel Beis Rabbeinu, Talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who say that if somebody has a Bechar that's born to him, he has a mitzvah to be makdish it. Like it says, Hazachar takdish kol Bechar Hazachar takdish l'Hashem l'kecha. So you see, there is a mitzvah to be makdish it, even though it's Kadosh Mirechem. Rabbi Yossi says that doesn't count for anything. It's still innately Kadosh and innately Aser. You have a mitzvah to say you're makdish it, but that doesn't actually accomplish the hektish, and therefore you can't. It's less likely and not logical that the pasuk Hashem should be teaching me that you could link to Bechar to make an Isser as opposed to Chatas and Hashem. Okay, next the Gemara discusses Nazirus Shimshon and why you don't have the same Joshua of La Hashem to that. So the Gemara says, Ki Yafli Lindor Neder Nazir Lahazir La Hashem. You have the extra word La Hashem, which appears by Nazirus Shimshon as well. So therefore, that should also include an extra type of Nazirus, which is innately asr, that you could also use to be matfis, to link, to create the neder of Nazirus. So that should apply to Nazirus Shimshon. So my answer is no. Rabbi Shimon, who holds you cannot link to Nazirus Shimshon, will say that extra word Hashem is to teach you something else. It's to teach you should only do a Nazirus that's really Shem Shemayim. Another Gemara brings the story of Shimon HaTzadik, which is brought at the beginning of Maseches Nedarim. Shimon HaTzadik says, all my days I never ate from the karbanos of a Nazir because I was afraid they weren't sincere, and it was not a valid carbon. In a sense, it was considered to be a false carbon. Only one time, someone came to me from the south, and he had beautiful eyes, he looked beautiful, and he had very beautiful curly hair. And I said, my son, what did you see that you decided to take this vow of Nazirus, which in the end you're going to have to shave off your beautiful hair? He said, I was a shepherd in my father's house, and my father's village, and I went to draw water from the spring, and I saw my reflection in the water, and I saw how beautiful my hair was, and my Torah jumped on me and wanted me to do an Avera. And I said, and he wanted to chase me out of the world. And I said to my Yetzirah, empty one, why are you being so proud of something in this short ephemeral world, which you're going to end up being food for worms and maggots, I swear that I'm going to shave off all this hair l'shem shemayim. And that's why I was Mekabel Nazirus. So Shimon Tzaddik stood up, kissed him on his head, and he said, there may be many Nazirim like you in Yisrael. About you, the Torah was talking about it, said, Ishki af linder neder lahazir lashem. So that is a sincere Nazirus l'shem shemayim. That's what Rabbi Shimon was referring to. Okay, now the Gemara has another question on Nazirus Shimshon. According to Rabbi Shimon's opinion, that he was never Mekabel Nazirus. It was only Nazirus that was existing automatically. So Gemara asks the Malach, who came to Manoach to predict that he would have a son who was born, Rabbi Shimshon seemed to command him to make him a Nazir. He said, Nazir lakim yihanar min abeten. So you see, he was told to make Nazirus. Whereas the Malach wasn't telling him to make Nazirus, the Malach was making him a Nazir by that phrase. He was creating this state of Nazirus on Shimshon. Next, the Gemara wants to know, how do we know that Nazirus Shimshon, one is allowed to become Tameh? The Gemara assumes that's because Shimshon himself became Tameh. So the Gemara says, what is the source? How do you know that? The Gemara first brings that Shimshon said that he killed people using the jawbone of a donkey, killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of